Greetings, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Higher Ed Geek podcast. This is episode number 27 with Al Day, another awesomely geeky higher ed professional. He's a big DC Comics fan and Disney lover, as well as musical theater, I believe, came up in this episode. So pretty cool stuff there. Al has a really cool job at UC Berkeley, which you'll hear us talk a lot about, being a case manager, just supporting students through really hard times. So really a highlight of the episode going into that work. And I really appreciate Al committing himself to being that hero for students on his campus. So just check out everything that we talked about in this episode down in the show notes over on the blog, higheredgeek.com. And please feel free to connect, leave a review, share out the show. Always nice hearing folks enjoying any and all episodes. So just get ready for an awesome one here after this quick message from our sponsor. This is episode number 27 with Alfred Day. Hey there, listeners. It's an honor to have our good friends at SwiftCake be a sponsor of the podcast because I've seen their work firsthand and it's truly unlike any student leadership training I've experienced. They've been voted Best Student Leadership Program unprecedented 5 times, so you know they must be doing something right. As a bonus for our listeners, SwiftCake is giving a $500 discount off their normal speaking fee if you mention Higher Ed Geek when you contact them. I highly recommend their trainings for your campus as your students will be talking about it for months afterwards. It's really great stuff. Check them out, swiftcakehq.com to learn more and let them know I sent you. Now, back to the show. So we'll just go ahead and jump in here. So just appreciate you making time for the episode here, and we'll go ahead and get started as we always do. If you'd like to do a brief introduction of who you are and how you got to be where you are today.
Sure. I'm Al Day, Alfred Day, but most people call me Al, and I am currently the Director of Student Affairs Case Management at University of California, Berkeley. Where I've been coming up on 5 years or so. And I got here from prior sort of 20 years in housing and residence life. And I made a sort of switch. It's not a huge switch in terms of things, but when you've been in res life for 20 years, it feels like a big switch. And now I do student affairs case management, working with students of concern on behavioral intervention teams here at UC Berkeley under the umbrella of the Dean of Students Office. Cool. And it's a great job that I love way more than I should.
That's always good. Yeah. And I guess I'm sure maybe like after all that time, because I feel like that's for me, like I'm still very early in my career and I just haven't like tried on a whole lot of hats yet. Like there's been some where I'm like, oh, I don't like this one, like maybe that or whatever. Like after that time, I'm sure you've started to figure out like what you like, what kind of environment would be good and that sort of thing. So I look forward to that day. Yeah. Well,
and I think it's the sort of thing where I never stopped liking res life, sort of by itself. I think it's just when you do the same thing for 20 years, at a certain point, I remember I was, doing a presentation in front of my latest group of RAs I was training. And I was, talking about something I'm sure that was very important, but in my brain, I was thinking about, okay, so after training today, I got to go to Target because I'm out of laundry soap. And then just sort of being that disengaged from what my day-to-day work was kind of a telling thing, which made me say, okay, maybe I need to start really thinking about what it is that I do and why I do it and what still makes me happy about it, which sort of ultimately resulted in me being here at Berkeley.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I guess it's good even, if it's like, you're going to have this like, you kind of shake it out and, just like, oh, well, it's like, oh, I'm like so disengaged. Like I got to like snap out of this and find something else that, some people, I guess, they can kind of go on for a little too long in that way, but it's good that you sort of had that realization and found something that was, a better fit for you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I find that a lot of people in the field end up sort of lasting the longest in positions that were just past the position that they really enjoyed. So people get very ambitious and then they, do a job really well and get promoted to the next job. And then the job that they spend the longest time in is a job they got promoted into that they don't like anymore and they're not that great at it. So they can't sort of move up, but and then they're looking at the people that are working for them doing the job that they really enjoyed.
Yeah, I think that is very true. Because I think it's come up in a couple of episode, even like way back in the other podcast I did of just like, that somebody might spend a lot of time in a place where they still have like a fair bit of student contact. And if they like, being ambitious and moves on to something else, not realizing, I guess, how much maybe they value that and missing that.
Absolutely.
And then like,
yeah.
Kind of trying to reconcile
Yeah.
that. But
ambition is a double-edged sword.
oh, yes. So, well, I guess, yeah. So, you had a long career in res life, and I don't know if that's where you like did kind of, start out even back like in undergrad, but something I like to hear and explore just obviously because we, work with students during their formative times in undergrad, what was that experience like for you when you were an undergrad student, and like, what are the things that gave you personally and or professionally that you still use today?
Well, it's an interesting thing because, and I don't think my story is unique in that I was a first generation college student, like many folks in the field. And, I would say, looking back on it now, I was woefully unprepared for college. And, I started, like most everybody I know as an RA in my sophomore year. And it was definitely life-changing. It was the first time I found community at college in a way that made sense and mattered to me. I was quite honestly not that engaged in the academics of college. I was a pretty bright guy, but it just, my goal had always been getting into college, and I kind of hadn't thought much about what I was going to do once I got there. And then getting involved as an RA was really sort of the thing that I latched onto and became, pretty much my identity as an undergraduate. And it really was, in essence, life-changing in the sense that it gave me a purpose as an undergrad and a career after I finished. And so I can't sort of overestimate how important that experience was for me, particularly the mentors and great folks in student affairs that I had at my undergrad, which was Fresno State. A great and important mentor to me was Charles Miller, who is, we call him Charlie, but who has the Charles Miller Award that they give out every year, who was a very important mentor of mine, who really set me on the path to the work I still do.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and I think like a similar thing for me, just like still like pretty fresh, just knowing like because I was an RA for 2 years, worked in res life as a graduate student, and my first professional role was also in res life for 2 years, and just like who I thought I was before I became an RA was like, not a leader, very shy, and like, I can still be pretty introverted, but just like, it gave me confidence in the unique strengths that I have and that I have something value to contribute, and just like kind of put me on this path to kind of give back to folks and support them in their own, education journeys. And it is, it's just wow. Because obviously, it's not a unique story, but it's still always just an awesome and powerful one to me. Just like how, how many people can have that experience and kind of work to give back.
Yeah. Well, especially when you talk about the sort of introversion part, because I was then and remain a fairly massive introvert. And I know part of the thing that we have to be careful of is particularly when we're hiring student staff is sort of only looking at the extroverts. And so I'm an introvert who has the ability to perform as an extrovert, but that's never going to be sort of my default. It's definitely something I put on. And sort of finding that for me was so critical to sort of my development. And it's part of the reason, particularly in res life, part of the reason why, and people who know me know I'm probably the person who has more sort of criticism about the field of student affairs than anybody I know. But I think it comes from a deep and abiding love for student affairs and wanting it to be better.
Yeah. Well, yeah, right there alongside with you. Because it's somebody who like thinks a lot and cares a lot and just like, tries to form sort of substantive, meaningful opinions and, have that discourse and stuff because, you care so much about the outcome.
Right. And you always, I think it's important to ask questions. Like for me, it's a central part of learning is asking why we do things. And there's a lot of things that I think we do in student affairs because the people who taught us how to do student affairs, that's what they did. And it's not necessarily that we've thought much about it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Well, I'm very tempted to go down that tangent, but we will hold off for now.
Sure.
But yeah, so, you found this job now, after this long career in housing and residence life, that you feel is like a really good fit for you. So what are those things that you really enjoy about the work that you're doing now, and just kind of explore that a little bit more?
Sure. When I sort of started questioning sort of my career in res life, I sort of did a self-assessment and said, okay, what are the parts of the job that you still really engage in and really enjoy and are really still sort of up for? And part of it for me at that time was the crisis management piece of sort of res life positions, in the sense that, and this probably goes back to the deep nerd that I am, is the part where it's as simple as people are having a tough time and somebody needs to help them. Was just sort of a real central core of my sort of student affairs sort of value system. And literally, I sort of came to that conclusion on a Saturday, and on a Sunday, I saw the job description here. At the time, it was for care manager at UC Berkeley, and it was almost exclusively crisis management. It was helping and working with students in distress. And the interesting thing was I was a director of housing at the time, and it was a bit of a step down for me, both financially and positionally. But I sort of took the risk and said, hey, this is something that matters, and this is something important. And if you're gonna, I'm not young, but I'm not yet ready to retire. And if you're gonna, have the next 20 years be as satisfying as the previous 20 years was, this might be a critical move. And it has been. It's been sort of really wonderful, because now my entire job is really about helping people in trouble. Sometimes those folks don't know they're in trouble, but they are. And, my job and the job of the team in my office is to help people when they're struggling. And the sort of incredibly satisfying piece of that is it's a job that I feel like I talk to a lot of people who look at the things that we do on a day-to-day basis and find it emotionally trying, and say to me, I don't know how you do that job. I couldn't possibly do that job and go home at the end of the day. And I go home at the end of the day feeling great. I feel like every day I do something that in a very real way helps people. And I don't know, it's too many issues of Superman, but I don't know a better way to live your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 'Cause I think that's the thing for me. Yeah. It's like, I know that maybe the way that I've experienced sort of like, working in conduct hasn't felt like a good fit, but yeah, like that kind of mentality, yeah, like resonates with me. And I always appreciate the idea that some people I know that work in conduct kind of come at it with is that, you just never want people to feel like you're giving up on them. And it's like, yeah, they're at this really hard time, and let's like help them through that versus, making it even more difficult or like making them feel bad about themselves or something. So
it's very much a mindset. I think it's very much about understanding what happens when someone goes through a tough time, because we've all gone through tough times ourselves, right? And sort of, one of the operating principles is, what would I have liked if, someone, was interfacing with me in the worst experiences of my life? What would have been helpful? Mm-hmm. And so that's sort of an operating principle for us around here often is, if you were on the other side of that table, you're meeting with that student, what would you hope that person would say or do for you?
Mm-hmm. Well, because I'm sure, I guess, and correct me if I'm wrong, like, I'm sure you're dealing with people who might be like acting out, and then also people who are just like, like really just having a rough time because of life events or like mental health or, just other kind of wellness pieces. But then also like, maybe that's cropping up where it's like, oh, you're like, causing trouble on your floor, or you're like, just being disruptive in the community, of the campus at large somehow, or, you're just doing things that you shouldn't be just because you're sort of in distress. So it's like, part of it's like, okay, I don't want you to like feel like I'm coming down on you and trying to get you in trouble. It's like, let's not give up on you. Let's like, if you want to stay here, we'll find a way. And
honestly, a lot of our students come in sort of with that, because, you get an email from somebody you don't know, right? Mm-hmm. Some guy named Al Day who works in the Sproul Hall, and it says, I hear you're having a tough time. Come see me. And so, I think that to a certain extent, it's not unreasonable for somebody to be a little wary of what that looks like. But, largely what we're doing, we go to pains to say, we're not the trouble office, right? Student conduct is, that's next door. But, in essence, that, our job is, you're having a tough time. Is there anything the university can do that can help you through this? Is there something that you need? Is there someone that we can advocate on your behalf to? Oftentimes for us, it's people who are going through a mental health crisis. And sometimes they are not in position to really understand the assistance that we're trying to provide. And that can be difficult, but it can also be really rewarding to understand that, one of the things we say in our office is, you hear a lot in higher ed that retention is all of our business with every student. And that's just not true for us. There are plenty of circumstances in which retention is not going to be best for this individual student, or is not going to be the best circumstance for the student as a whole, right? Or for the campus community as a whole. And those can be really tough meetings and tough calls to make and things of that sort. And working with a student who's going through a significant mental health crisis, who, the best thing might be, hey, you need to take a medical leave and go get some treatment for, several months. But that person is not in position to really appreciate that. And perhaps is their mental health crisis, the symptoms of it are they can't really act in their own best interest, is really tough and emotionally trying. But at the same time, those are the folks that really need our help. One of the things we say in our office is, if the normal protocols and ways of working were going to work in this circumstance, they probably wouldn't have ended up in our office. People would have already tried them. Right. And so the joke we make is, if somebody had a camera on our office, they would think we weren't working, because so much of our job is sitting at our desk with our heads in our hands going, well, what are we going to do about this? I don't know. Do you have a good idea? I don't know. Do you have a good idea? Because it's just being creative and trying to find a way to help a student that nobody has thought of yet.
Yeah, because I'm sure, there's some probably tried and true things that you can do, but it is so much of the kind of complexity of humanity that you're dealing with. So Absolutely. It's really not going to be a one size fits all thing.
Yeah, and it so rarely is, even if the circumstances are similar. But that's also the other thing that makes it interesting. I've never had a boring day at this job. It's because every circumstance requires you to be as creative as you possibly can be to come up with a solution, because everybody else on campus has already tried and failed. Mm-hmm. And so we're often the last sort of stop.
Yeah. Well, and I guess too, I'm sure for some people, they might be oh yeah, who is this person, trying to reach out and confused or whatever. But yeah, and other times, it's been very impactful for me, just realizing that people are noticing, if things are different or anything like that. And just somebody looking out for you, and just reaching out, it's just those things. And yeah, the support services that you offer just makes the world to people, worlds of difference to people.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, one of the things we've heard from students is that, UC Berkeley is a very large institution, 40,000 people, 40,000 students, and it can be very impersonal. And even in campuses half the size of ours, you hear students talk about they feel like a number. And I've had more than one student say, this is the only office that treated me like an individual and not just, student number 1275826, that may actually be an actual student ID number. I don't know. I just made up random numbers. But sort of our goal is to bring somebody in and say, hey, no, we care about you as an individual. What's going on with you? What is your challenge, and what can we do to help you? The joke I like is, and it became sort of a meme on campus meme, is I feel like we're engaged in artisanal student affairs work, because every sort of thing we do with the student is individually crafted for what's going on with that student. And that of course means there's a lot of time and energy that goes into individual students. And so we're victims of our own success, in that whenever we are able to help a student, the folks who were involved in that situation, if they feel good about it, they're more likely to refer more students to us, and then we get busier. And ultimately, unless we grow, it makes us less capable of giving that same attention to the next student. But I won't say it's a good problem to have, but it means we're on the right track.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause that is that tricky business of just you would hope that not every single student on campus is experiencing like hugely disruptive, life events that
Yeah.
you would need to help with. So it's like, yeah, it's almost like you want to get to a sweet spot where it's like, okay, what seems to be like, quote unquote normal amounts of traffic
Right.
into our office, because if everybody's experiencing like, they don't know where to go to for, classes and registration, and they just feel really stressed out. It's like, maybe we need to like do some sort of like,
Right. Where's the
like,
education
yeah,
piece?
like,
Where are we being proactive?
yeah,
Right.
like stave this off.
And we do have, a bit of a challenge in sort of balancing, so we spend a lot of time talking about what student risk factors and what is sort of the threshold for a student to be referred to our services. And it started fairly high, where we're really concerned about people who are potentially going to harm others or potentially going to harm themselves. And those are still obviously the things we're really concerned about. But there's been a bit of it's hard to say mission creep because I think it's still good work, but sort of our mandate has expanded because one of the big sort of areas for us is risk points or distress points, where you're observing a student and there's certain factors that come into play that says, hey, this student might be heading towards distress or might be distressed. And as we've gotten good at educating folks about that, they've gotten good at referring students to us early, which we want because interventions are more likely to be successful if they're early. But the number of students who are distressed at that point is much higher. And so then it sort of puts pressure on us to be able to provide that support in a very real way to a student. One of the big sort of points of that we keep an eye on is if a student's missing class pretty regularly, that had been attending class really regularly. That's a point we want to keep an eye on. So we put it in our gold folder to say to folks, hey, this is a point you want to pay attention to. This might be a sign of the students in distress. And people paid attention to that. And now we get reports when students are missing a lot of class, which is important and which is good and which we can be helpful in if we, another person reaching out to a student. But we get so many of those that, our ability to actually do more than send a letter gets compromised, right? To just say, hey, we noticed you're missing classes. Please let us know if there's anything we can do. Whereas 2 years ago, I might be able to send an email, do a phone call, have an RA check in on them, do a few things, It's just a matter of us. We're victims of our own success. I think we've done a good job. And because we've done a good job, more people are comfortable working with us. And the more people that are comfortable working with us, the more impacted we are. Again, good problem to have, I suppose.
Yeah. So yeah, really interesting work. Just kind of curious about that. So we will leave it at that and kind of move on here. So you kind of mentioned, kind of your kind of nerd geek core, sort of, the kind of superhero kind of mentality that you have, which I think is a good one for all of us to be like good, positive bystanders and just like helpful people. So if you want to talk about a little bit more sort of like what you're geeking out about currently, the stuff that you've always been into and maybe anything that you've discovered more recently. Because I know you're, I think, a pretty big DC fan, and I think
I am a huge DC fan.
Yeah, so talk a little bit more about that, and just anything else that you kind of geek out about.
Well, it's interesting. I'm the biggest DC fan in the world. So yesterday, Action Comics number 1,000 came out, which is the first American comic anyway to hit number 1,000. They also considered it the birthday of Superman, although it's not technically. It's good enough for government work. And so yesterday was a pretty cool day. At lunch, I went down to the local comic shop and bought my copy, and then came back to work. And my new comic was sitting on my desk, and the whole afternoon I had to resist just closing my office and cracking open a comic because I thought that probably wasn't the most responsible use for the state of taxpayers' salary they're paying. But I'm geeking out. I'm always geeking out on comics. I love comic books. We are in the process. I work with a variety of educators, higher ed folks around the country, put together panels for a variety of things under the umbrella of Geek Ed. So we just finished doing a panel for WonderCon, which is a Comic-Con that happens in Anaheim. Looks like we're probably going to be putting together a panel for San Francisco Comic-Con in June, and we're putting the finishing touches on the 4 panels we have done for the last couple of years at the Big Daddy Comic-Con International in San Diego. So that we're deep in the process of, and that's always incredibly exciting to put those together. It's a lot of work, but it's just so much fun. Comic-Con is probably my favorite place on the planet. It's like Brigadoon. I'm also a giant musical theater nerd, so I throw in the musical theater reference. It's like Brigadoon in that it's this wonderful place that appears for 4.5 days once a year and then disappears into the mist, only to return the next year.
Yeah.
So Comic-Con is maybe my favorite place, only with Disneyland a close second. Where I just had a sort of a life goal I achieved a couple weeks ago, where I went on the Walk and Walt's Footsteps tour. And they took us inside Walt's private apartment at Disneyland, which I'm the kind of nerd that I just was up there and I got a little dusty in the eye and I got really weepy because I was just thinking about, all the stuff and Walt Disney and I love Disneyland and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not just nerd, I'm uber nerd. I'm looking around my office right now and I kind of do this intentionally, and I got so much nerdy stuff in my office that I'm sure people wonder why. But I got to tell you, students respond to it in such a positive fashion. It's something I'll keep doing, particularly in the work I do now. This sort of nerd sort of environment I've created has really allowed me an entry point to so many conversations with so many students. This is something that's come up recently. I'm trying to figure out what to do with this idea, whether to write an essay or a paper or something of that sort. But I'm of the critical belief that fandom, whatever that fandom looks like for people, is so critically important. That knowing what someone loves really tells you an enormous amount about who they are and what their values are. And the fact that you love something, when I'm talking to young professionals, oftentimes they go, well, what's your one piece of advice about being successful in student affairs? And the advice I always give is have something that you absolutely love, that you will not compromise on, that has nothing to do with work, whatever that looks like. And for me, it's sort of my nerdy stuff. But it sort of came up when I was doing a lot of community theater, and I was having a really sort of stressful time at work. And what I discovered when I was doing the theater is I had to be present. I had to be there if I was going to do well at all in the show. And the result of that was I couldn't think about work, which is exactly what I needed to do, was to A, have a reason that was non-negotiable that I had to leave work at 5, and B, to have whatever that activity be, to be so all-consuming as to I didn't have room to think about work. And it actually was so incredibly healthy. So I could talk about stuff I'm geeking out about, or I probably should have my own podcast for just the rest of my life talking about stuff I'm geeking out about.
Right. Just like Al talking comics, just
Al talking comics,
right.
With a little trip to Disneyland and then, a little side one at musical theater.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's
Here's my thoughts on Oklahoma.
Right. Yeah. Well, because, I think it's so cool. Just, like you got to, do that tour. And I think, kind of the power of being somewhere that like has so much history in it, and just really appreciating that and kind of soaking it all up and just kind of letting it hit you.
Yeah. I kept there was 4 chairs and I made sure to touch them all because I knew Walt had sat in one of them. I wasn't sure which one, but it was this weird thing where I just touched the chairs. I had to.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. Cause I was a history major, so just generally appreciating history and just seeing old stuff. It's just there's a whole story of how this thing got to this old antique shop or something, or
right.
Whatever it is. But
whatever that story is, and it's I don't know, it's for me anyway, it's so sort of critically important and so engaging, and it really, oh my gosh, like I said earlier, I think fandom is important. I think when you get someone talking about the thing that they love, there's this thing that comes over them. It's one of the reasons I love Comic-Con. This thing comes over a person when they're talking about something they're really into, where they sort of lose time. This usually comes up, around and amongst nerds, but I think everybody has a version of this, where the thing that I always say, your fandom is the thing that you can talk about for hours and never get tired of, and your friends look at you like you're nuts. I think everybody's got a little bit of that. Some of us have multiple things, and which is, why we're middle-aged and single. But I think that it's such a lovely, when I know someone's fandom, I feel like I know them.
Oh, yeah. Because, that's something I've kind of thought about a lot and seen a lot. It's it doesn't matter what it is, just how you love it and how you sort of like engage with it and stuff. Cause yeah, it's obviously like
Absolutely.
sports very popular thing, or it's cars, or like,
Right.
we had past guests where it's like woodworking or, like, I mean, you doing theater, like I'm sure there's a lot of people who do similar kind of things, or like improv, people do, like it's a very all consuming, kind of creative endeavor. It's like part of the reason why, I wanted to like kind of format this podcast this way. It's just like, because there's obviously a lot of overlap in the things that people enjoy, but just like hearing those like really unique things is really fun because like everybody has their thing. And like, if you think that it could be a thing, there's like billions of people on earth. So like, there's definitely somebody into it.
Yeah. There's somebody who's into it, right? Like I'm a DC Comics fan, right? And the other thing is I'm a DC Comics fan, but I get really annoyed at sort of the reductive nature of how comics fans talk about like I'm a DC fan, so that means I hate Marvel. I'm like, no, I love Marvel. I love Marvel comics. I love Marvel movies. Like the great thing about fandom is it's not necessary to hate one thing if you love another. Although a lot of people sort of engage in it in that way, that like your identity is not only formed by the thing you love, but by the thing you hate. And I just try not to, like, there are things I don't enjoy, but I don't spend a whole lot of time going, this thing sucks, because I don't know what the real ultimate point of that is, other than, sort of making you cool guy. And let's be honest, I'm already a cool guy. I don't need extra.
Right.
Like it's such an interesting thing when you really have a conversation. And I honestly feel like I don't know a person until I know, and this is definitely true at work, until I know sort of who you are outside of work. Not that I can't work with you, but it's hard. And, it's not like I'm entitled to know who you are outside of work, but I feel like I can really engage with you. When I see you really love a thing, that tells me about you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, even if it's just like a morsel, because I think I've taken a few trips recently, and like people always ask like, oh, how, like, how's your trip or whatever. And it usually pops up because I like when I travel to new areas to go try like local craft beer, because it gets a little bit of a local flavor, it's always something different and new, whatever. So I feel like that's like my thing at work is like, I mean, a lot of people know my like geeky interests because I've had a lot of my like toys on my desk, but it's like, when people are like, oh, how was your trip? I'll be like, oh yeah, I tried this brewery, I went here. So then like, they'll be able to say, oh, have you tried this one that's in, Baltimore? Have you done this, that, and so it's like, it just kind of breaks down those barriers a little bit, where it's like they know me as a little bit more than who I am day to day at work. And and
I think it's a real genuine way to connect with people. I think it's you hear a lot of people get very nervous these days about sort of, well, how do I engage with people at work in a way that is not sort of, particularly right now, where all of a sudden there's a bunch of, straight guys who are like, well, I can't talk to you, can't say anything at work, which I think is just about the most ridiculous thing in the world. But it's this sort of idea of there's plenty to talk about that doesn't sort of marginalize and victimize people. Like, just be genuine about who you are and what you love, and you don't have to be a jerk at work. You don't have to. I don't know. I get very frustrated sometimes with people who can't figure out how to be around other people without being harmful. I just, because it's and part of it is, even in fandom, like I've seen it happen, right? And I've been guilty of it, where sort of one of my operating principles is, if you love a thing, it's important to include people into that circle of love and not exclude people. And so the distinction I always make is, I love comic books and I love Superman and Batman, right? And so if I meet somebody, and I was guilty of this when I was younger, meet somebody who says, oh, I really like Batman, and I say, oh, have you read The Dark Knight Returns? And they say no. What I used to say is, oh, well, you're not really a Batman fan if you haven't da-da-da-da, which is such a just crappy way to do it, because that's all about your own ego and proving your own credibility in something that in the cosmic scheme of things isn't really important. But if you just switch it, instead of saying you're not a fan, if you just switch it and say, hey, if you're a fan, you should try this, which is just a slight adjustment, but brings people in and toward you, and increases the circle of people who love what you love in a way that I think is a really neat, as opposed to a way that just sort of excludes people and sort of is about your own ego. There's a lot of, as much as I love fandom, there's a lot of crappy stuff in fandom, which you can see from like the Gamergate stuff and some of the real awful things that we've seen in those spaces as well. But I don't know. I think it's all about love ultimately. Like if you can figure out a way to share love and share passion and keep in mind that it's about including people in the circle as opposed to keeping people out of the circle, man, that's a powerful thing.
It is indeed. Because it's like, it's okay to have preferences, and like, just because like you like a thing and somebody doesn't like it, like doesn't make them wrong or stupid or something, or like,
Right.
you don't have to, because it gets it. There's like so many layers. It's like, it's okay to have preferences because like for me, like I'm a huge Star Wars fan.
Right.
And like I prefer Star Wars to Star Trek, but I've watched a lot of Star Trek and it's
Right.
good, and that's
Yeah,
fine.
it's
But
good.
I just prefer it. But like, it's just like there's so many presumptions that people make, and it's just like, being more welcoming and like being open to what other people are into, because it's like you can have preferences, you don't have to like everything. Nobody else has to like all the things that you like, and there's kind of room for everything now, especially just with so many platforms. And
Oh, absolutely.
it's just it's
When I think
interesting.
so much of that is just about sort of the human impulse, which is, I don't think, a great impulse, but this human impulse to create an in group and an out group. To be, hey, I'm on the cool side of this equation, and you aren't. I have the cool music and you don't. It's just, come on. Like you can love many, many things. I love DC because it means so much to me, and it sort of had a lot to do with how I formed my sort of moral and ethical center. And Marvel has some really cool comics that I really like and I've really enjoyed. Right. Both of those things can be true.
Yes. Yeah. So, well, I guess, I mean, it kind of answers a bit of my questions. And I guess, I guess just to kind of follow up on that, because I am just curious, because you mentioned like a couple of different like Comic Cons, and I went to San Diego a couple of years ago when you all like put on like one of your panels. And I guess going to like some of the different cons and stuff like that, like, I know that's like a huge thing for you, especially San Diego is like a, really just a yearly kind of pilgrimage. What do those kind of specifically give you in terms of like, that's kind of a way that you geek out about the things that you geek out about is going to those conventions. Like what is that experience like for you? How has that kind of positively contributed to your life?
It's such an interesting question, because I've been saying for years that, particularly as a higher ed administrator, I wish higher ed was more like Comic-Con. Because if you go to Comic-Con, it's a bunch of people who are really interested, very engaged in learning stuff, whether that be learning the history of a particular character or the history of a creator, or learning how to do art in a certain way, or learning how to break into screenwriting, or really, really interested in sort of what's coming up in entertainment and things of that sort. And if you consider sort of the panels, the classroom, where you're getting sort of the formalized education, and you considered like the lines and the exhibit floor sort of outside of the classroom thinking, if the conversations I've had in line at Comic-Con, about passionate conversations with people about, sort of nerdy topics, can you imagine if students on college campuses were engaging that passionately about the things that they were engaging in class? Even if it's a disagreement, right? Like Comic-Con is like the perfect example of like a civil disagreement, and I've seen incredibly heated arguments at Comic-Con, but nobody got into a fight about it. But the other piece that I love about specifically Comic-Con International in San Diego is it matters so much to the people who go, that it is for a lot of people, it's the one time a year, the 4.5 days of Comic-Con is a time where they are 100% fully themselves. Where they edit themselves every day of their life, because it's just, you have to get through life, right? And so to sit at work and be like, Action Comics number 1000 came out yesterday. I was really excited about Action Comics number 1000 coming out yesterday. I didn't pull the guys and the folks in my office in and go, okay, let me talk about Action Comics number 1000 for an hour about how cool the story is and how great the art is and how important Superman is, because I'm at work. And I don't, if I want to keep getting a paycheck, I gotta, do my job. And you go to Comic-Con and it's 4.5 days of whatever that thing is that you love. There's somebody there who loves it more and who knows stuff about it that you don't. And quite frankly, also the guy who created it is there, and you get to shake his hand, and it's going to mean something to you because when you were 8, you read this thing that formed. The example I use is, as a kid, I grew up and I was reading DC Comics, and Superman was such a big sort of way I sort of formed my view of the world in terms of what it meant to be powerful. Sort of the core idea, in my opinion, of Superman is that those who are granted great power have a responsibility to use it on behalf of other people, right? And that sort of Superman's whole thing is he's the most powerful thing walking on the planet, but he goes and he thinks we're so cool, right? Superman thinks, man, humans are awesome, right? And that's a cool thing to sort of a cool sort of thing if you're lucky enough to have privilege to sort of understand that privilege is unearned and that it's kind of cool to be able to use it on behalf of other people. And it's all about that. It's all about sort of spending 4.5 days with people who are really engaged and really interested and really, I'll be honest, some of the best people in the world. Not everybody's perfect, but some of the best people you're ever going to meet in the world, you're going to meet at Comic-Con. Some of the kindest, most generous, most sort of loving people all go to San Diego for 4.5 days and talk about the stuff they love. I can't think of a better place to spend 4.5 days. It's definitely, I've been lucky enough. I think this year's 2018. So this will likely be my official 20th year going to Comic-Con.
Wow.
I've been lucky enough to go for 20 years. But I didn't go until I was 28 years old, and I had heard about it my whole life. And so to a certain extent, even though I've gone for 20 years, there is a part of me that feels bad that I missed the 28 Comic-Cons that happened before I got a chance to go. I'm really upset that I'm like, is there a way I can go back in time and go to those? Because those are probably pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, and I remember too, it's just people from all over, like all different kinds of people coming together. So there's just kind of a beauty in that as well. And yeah, there's nothing else like it.
Well, and talk about inclusivity and diversity, right? Like everybody's there. And particularly in the last several years, as the gender balance has really shifted. When I started going to Comic-Con 20 years ago, it was like 85% folks who identified as male and 15% folks who identified as female. You didn't see a large contingent of folks who identified as trans. You didn't see a lot of women. It just wasn't. It was the same old, sort of. And even I'm black, so even I was like a pretty rare sight at Comic-Con. And now everybody goes, and it's people from all over the gender spectrum. It's people from all sort of walks of life, and it's just a really amazing place to be.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I guess as we kind of wrap up and sort of that, speaking of Comic-Con, it's just kind of this great cross-section of people and fandoms and everything. You mentioned like Action Comics and stuff. What else is sort of grabbing your attention specifically, like right now? What are you reading, watching, listening to that we could link out to in the show notes?
I'm really into a couple of podcasts right now. Everybody knows about My Favorite Murder. It's a terrific podcast. It's so good. It's so funny. The two women who do that show are kind of amazing. Black Panther was massive, and I've talked. If anybody wants to hear me talk about Black Panther, do a search for Black Panther in my name. There's a million places where I'm talking about Black Panther. But the Black Lightning TV show just finished this week. And it's interesting because Black Lightning, because he's a DC guy, was actually the first sort of black superhero I was aware of. And the show is really good. And it really is a show that's very intentionally talking about social issues in a very cool and interesting way. So I'm 100% behind that. The other thing is Mad Magazine just sort of relaunched, and I just got my first issue subscription last night. And I haven't had a chance to really dig into it, but I read like the first couple, just flipped through, and it's pretty cool. Mad Magazine's been around my whole life, since before I was born. And it's such an influential magazine that people don't really think about a lot. But I'd tell folks, Mad #1, they renumbered it, is on the stands right now. Go out and find a copy of Mad Magazine, because holy smokes, is it funny. It's just really just straight up funny.
Yeah.
And I could talk about this stuff for hours. I also just finished, got off of Amazon, the annotated Sandman, which if you haven't read the Sandman comics, they're fantastic. And there's a series of books that are in essence, it's a fairly dense read for a graphic novel. And so it reprints the comic in black and white, but then has a lot of, sort of annotations available to sort of give you a deeper understanding of sort of what was going on. I was in Las Vegas for my nephew's funeral, or not his funeral, oh my God, his wedding. That's a big mistake. And I spent a lot of time in my hotel room because I'm cheap and didn't want to gamble. And so I spent 2 days sort of reading the annotated Sandman. And it was just amazing. I had the greatest time sitting in a hotel room and reading through this. So there's a bunch of great stuff out there.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So we'll link. We'll find some links to that stuff so people can check it out. And then we will end the episode here. Anything or things that you are looking forward to in your job, life, and or the world, just to wrap up the episode on an optimistic note.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to a lot of stuff. I'm looking forward to San Francisco Comic-Con's coming up in June. I'm looking forward to that. We've got a panel that we're doing. I'm hoping Cal, my university, Cal, we call it, just launched an esports program.
Oh, cool.
And part of that is a Women in Gaming initiative, which is really cool. I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that I can pull a panel together for those women who are part of that organization. I always love doing panels with students who can talk about sort of their fandoms. If I can pull it together for San Francisco Comic-Con, I'll be really super excited. And I'm just looking forward to the summer. Avengers opens next week, obviously. Everybody's kind of stoked about that. Brian Michael Bendis is starting a new writer on the Superman books. Super excited about that. I'll be honest, I've been traveling a lot lately, and so I got a stack of comics next to my bed, my reading table, that is bigger than me. And I look forward to a weekend where I don't have to travel and I can just sit down and just power through some really great comics.
Yeah, all great stuff. And best of luck with the conventions coming up and everything. And I know. It's like I'm sort of looking forward to like a weekend of nothing soon. Which is just like hashtag adulthood.
Right.
But I mean, that's all great stuff. And really cool, because actually that's I guess by the time this one posts, I just posted our episode that kind of explores the kind of campus esports a little bit more. So very curious kind of seeing that blossom a bit. So I think that's definitely a good idea to kind of highlight that work.
I'm super excited about it, mostly because it's a little outside of my own fandom, because I get a little motion sick when I play video games. So I haven't been a big video game person just because I get physically ill, but I'm really excited to see what happens.
There you go. Yeah. Cool. Well, just appreciate your time and all that you shared. And just again, we can include stuff down in the show notes for folks to check out and ways to find Al online. And again, appreciate your time and have a good rest of your night.
Thanks. Good talking to you.
This podcast is a proud member of the ConnectEDU Podcast Network, bringing together diverse voices and thoughtful discussions to the higher ed community. Check us out online at connectedu.network or on Twitter at ConnectEDUPod. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the podcast. Please rate, review, and subscribe so you'll never miss an episode. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode of the Higher Ed Geek podcast.